Welcome back. All right, so I've talked recently about things that make me happy or not happy while I'm watching hockey games, and I figured why not use the panic face and the happy face, go through the various stages, and also have the line in the middle showing whether I'm happy or I'm not. Because when I watch hockey games, it really varies. The interesting thing is that I used to do live streams during games. Absolutely did, but because of the fact that not only video, when you use video footage, the NHL can say, "Hey, copyright," and cause you trouble, but the audio itself from the game can be flagged. I don't do those anymore. But the other thing is, while the camera's on me, I don't have that reaction. The outward reactions are not there. You might get a mild reaction when I'm upset, but I don't get really angry because I know the camera's on me. I know it's rolling. I know I'm live on the internet. When the camera's not on, it gets a little different. So I'll talk about the things that I enjoy the most watching a game. And it's a cliche that's at the top of the board. Play a full 60 minutes. Full 60 minutes means the first, the second, and the third period, the team gives their best effort. I do not expect a team to win every single game. I do not expect a team to be the absolute greatest every night. But it's that full effort. And when I don't feel like that full effort's there, it can be a little bit of a rough time. Excellent defense I put right underneath because that's the thing. And like in recent games involving both Boston and Vancouver, I've been ticked off because teams, both Boston and Vancouver this year, have been very good defensively. And when they're just really sloppy and they're not covering guys and they're allowing breakaways, 2-on-1s, 3-on-2s, and just goals after goals, leaving goaltenders hung out to dry, it gets frustrating because I know that's not their identity, and I know they can be a heck of a lot better defensively. So that's where I get kind of ticked off. I'd rather see a team I cheer for lose by a score of 2-1 than 7-5. Like that's just reality. And also winning wise, I'd rather see them win a game 2-1 rather than 7-5. I'm happy if they win, but I'd rather see the lower scoring end of it when they win. And it's interesting too because to me a perfect game is about 3-2, 4-2, somewhere in that region. But again, I know people really like the high scoring bonkers games. It can be a little tough for the heart. A good penalty being taken can be. I'm fine. I am fine with a person taking a penalty if it prevents a goal. I am fine with a person taking a penalty if it prevents a 3-on-1 from converting. And I'm not talking about like a really dirty penalty either. Just a simple hooking penalty holding. Sometimes I'm fine with a guy, on a breakaway getting a hook if the player who's hooking him realizes the guy I'm hooking here is not going to be able to score the goal and is unlikely to score on the penalty shot. So the penalty shot's coming, but you're like, you know what? That's fine. So those are times where I'm okay with the penalty. Now, confident play, and it's interesting because there are teams that can get a little bit full of themselves, and it can show both on and off the ice. I like it when a team's confident without being arrogant. So a team that goes out there, they do their job, and there's no arrogance to how they celebrate, no arrogance to how they are and things. And just, yeah, I like a team that's confident, knows they do well, and realizes the job's not done. So they don't at the end of the game, have this. It's hard to describe, but when you see it, just body language can be big, and sometimes the way they are in interviews, pre or post game. There's nothing more frustrating than when your team is lost and you see the interviews after the game with that team, and you'd think they won from the way they're talking. Like, no, we're fine, things are great. Yeah, no, we just had a couple of bad breaks. We'll be fine. We're on the right path while you're yelling at the TV. But yeah, the confident play is good. Big saves and big goals. You'll notice it's not as high as the others. I do enjoy those, obviously, but if you play the full 60 minutes, that's going to be part and parcel with that as well. So that's going to happen. Now, the one thing that I don't have on the board is penalties and calls, because every single night in every single review, people are complaining about, well, it's the refs. My team didn't lose. The refs caused my team to lose. I don't generally have that opinion. It has happened. It absolutely has. There have been some calls that have ticked me off. Generally, during the regular season, that's not the case because the regular season is not as important as playoffs. That's why I've got playoffs here on the right-hand side, and I'll talk about logos and all that when we get there. But I really, honestly, during the regular season, I don't get as upset. I really don't. So I'm not censoring myself when I do the reviews that way. I'm not like, these calls were terrible, and then as soon as the camera rolls, being like, I'm fine. These are fine. No, and I think there's a little bit of gray area when it comes to some of the calls that they make, but in general, they try to be as consistent as they can be. I acknowledge that, even with the two referee system, they're going to miss stuff. And if we went back down to one referee, guys are going to take liberties. It's just the way that's going to work. But I don't get worked up about calls. During the playoffs, it is a little bit different. And again, I'll talk about it when we get there. One thing, too, I decided to put up here, and I've got that in a different color, obviously, on this side, is good results after a coaching change. I do like to see that. I do like to see a team respond positively. And not only that, I like to see new systems brought in by that coach as well, where it's actually changed things. It's not just they got a new coach and suddenly started winning, but you can see what that coach is doing in order to foster those changes. So with Vancouver, Tocchet, you could see changes. With Jim Montgomery in Boston, you could see changes. With Pete DeBoer in Dallas, definitely changes to their offensive game. They weren't able to score until he got there, and now they don't have a problem with goal scoring. Now, on the downside, lousy special teams. It's frustrating when a team you're cheering for takes a penalty and you're like, this is going to go in the net, isn't it? Yep, the penalty kill sucks. We went through that in Vancouver early in the season last year. It's a big part of the reason Bruce Boudreau ended up being out of a job. It's one of a few. And I honestly, my issue with the Canucks with that was just they should have fired him a lot sooner. I thought it was bad to leave him hung out to dry like that when it was obvious he wasn't staying. But lousy special teams can be frustrating. And also, recently I've been talking about Philadelphia's power play. I've also talked about Pittsburgh's, because even for me, and I don't cheer for Philly or Pittsburgh, I get frustrated watching it, where I'm like, man, why aren't they taking the shot there? And you can see the confidence isn't there. They go into the power play. The body language tells you this is probably not going to work, and then it doesn't. It gets really, really frustrating to watch, because they can get 8 power plays in a game, and they're probably not going to score on any of them. And in Philadelphia's case, I think it was a week ago now, they had the game with 8 power plays. They didn't score on any of them. Bad penalties. Bad penalties are frustrating. It's something I've talked about a lot. I know with the Canucks, Tyler Myers has come up a lot. Not as much this season. I feel like Myers is having his best year as a Canuck this year. Not strange then the Canucks have really turned things around when you don't have guys taking the bad penalties they were before. It just feels like when it's a bad penalty, very often it ends up with a power play goal. Like when it's that stupid, why are you taking that penalty? You're in the offensive zone. Why are you tripping the guy behind his own net? What are you doing? Then that's going to end up with a power play goal. And so that can be frustrating for me, and that's where, I kind of get a little bit of the Tourette's, a little bit. Lack of pushback. Now, when I say this, a lot of people are going to take that as like, guy gets run into the boards and they don't come out and fight. No, the lack of pushback to me is when the team is down 2 or 3-0, and they just the body language is one of a team that's just kind of given up. And it is more frustrating now than it was 10 years ago, because we see so many teams with 2 and 3 goal comebacks. So when you see a team down by 2 goals and they're playing like they're down by 8, and there's no chance, it can get really, really frustrating, because it can take one goal to completely turn things around. That game last night between Boston and Edmonton, once Edmonton got that goal in the third period, I was like, oh crap. It just hit me. I was like, oh, not this, not again. It's Edmonton, isn't it? So that lack of pushback can be frustrating, but protecting the lead. And notice we're getting closer to the panic phase. Protecting the lead drives me insane. When a team has a 1-goal lead in the third period and there's, say, 15 minutes left, and they're just dumping the puck in, sending in one forechecker, and just everybody sitting back, you are giving them most of the ice. You are letting them into your zone without fighting them off. You're giving them a chance to set up. So you're giving them way more scoring opportunities than you would if you just kept playing as if you didn't have the lead. I'm much happier when a team is playing like they don't have the lead. I'm much happier when a team has a 3-1 lead in the third period and they're attacking and they're playing, and you're still playing your star players. You're not necessarily, we're going to rest some guys here. We're up by 2. It's the third period. It'll be fine. No, go out there, and the best way to protect the lead, I say this a lot, is to press. Keep the puck at the other end. Because bad things happen when you sit on a lead. It just does. And this goes back a long way too. The worst lead in hockey is 2 goals. I would say that at this point, I don't know that there is a lead in hockey that's completely and totally safe once you're, say, halfway through a second period. If you're up 4-0, last night we saw Columbus was up 4-0, and then all of a sudden it's 4-4. And I understand too that the reaction to that would be, well, that's Columbus. Fair. But there are other examples of that during the year where a team will have a big lead and then it's just gone. So protecting the lead can be the most frustrating thing to watch, other than, to me, sloppy play. Sloppy play is rough. And it's part of the reason why those really high scoring games can be some of the most frustrating for me to watch, because there's so many sloppy plays, so many turnovers. If your team's playing well and if they're not committing a bunch of turnovers, if their defensive coverage is good, you're not going to have an 8-7 score. You're not going to have a 9-8 score. It's not going to happen. You may not score those 9, you may not score those 8, but the other team isn't going to score that many either. So it can be frustrating to me, because again, if the team that I'm watching is one that I'm used to seeing 60 minutes from, an excellent defense, when I start seeing that sloppy play and them sitting back to protect the lead, it can get really, really frustrating. And then in terms of with the coach, I get frustrated when I see the players tuning out the coach. So the example that I use a lot is, you have a coach who's upset behind the bench, he's freaking out, he's not happy, and there's no reaction from the players at all. They're just sitting on the bench staring forward as if they're already planning their vacations for the off season and thinking about where they'd waive their no trade clause to go to. Like, you can see it. The body language is there when players have tuned out the coach. And then I see people comment after the coach gets fired of, players have got to start, grow more of a spine, and they've got, well, if they've tuned out the coach and they're not listening to the coach, what more can be done? Because they're not listening to the guy in the room that's supposed to be their boss. So once that happens, it's kind of done. It can't. I don't have on the board frustration with who's in the lineup and who's getting ice time and who isn't. I kind of trust coaches with those decisions. Plus, getting upset about who is or isn't getting ice time. Closest I would get is when I see somebody with top ice time and thinking to myself, I wonder why he's there. And then I'll watch during the game for what's there. Maybe it's physical play. Maybe he's really good at being at the net front. Maybe he brings that physical side. Maybe they feel like they need to change things up. I'm more forgiving of that, I think, than a lot of people. And also, I've realized being upset because somebody's in the lineup doesn't change the fact he's in the lineup. So it's just that's there, and so I'm not going to get upset about who is or isn't in the lineup. I don't have on there either anything about playing the kids, playing the young players. Young players will make more mistakes. They absolutely do. They can be very exciting and they can be fast, but they do make a lot of mistakes. I totally understand why coaches look at a player and say, okay, you're very talented, but you're 19. We're going to have you watch. We're going to have you sit as a healthy scratch tonight. We want you to take notes. We want you to... So, like, for instance, earlier in the season, Anaheim with Leo Carlsson, I get that. I totally get why you would want to ease a top player into your lineup, because, yeah, kids do make mistakes. And it's easy for us as fans to say, well, just play them. Yeah, when those mistakes can cost you your job as a coach, you're kind of thinking, maybe I'm not going to play the guy who's going to make those mistakes. Because he's going to make a couple of really spectacular plays at one end, but then he's not going to come back when the puck's turned over, and it's going to end up in our net. And maybe that happens in a game, and a coach says, yeah, you need to work on that part of your game. Maybe there's something they see at practice that tells them, you know what, this guy isn't quite ready for that top line spot. And so I've never been a fan of the idea of just, he's a star, give him that top line minutes, because he's number one guy. And sometimes it works, very often it doesn't. And not only that, but if you rush that player into that spot and they flop at that spot, you might be creating a bust where maybe there wasn't one before. Now, playoffs really amp this up, and I'm wearing Minnesota North Stars. This has got the 1991 Stanley Cup Final patch. Heartbreaking Stanley Cup Final, but I still remember it as just being a magical run for the Minnesota North Stars. The Vancouver Canucks, Boston Bruins, Dallas Stars. I intentionally use the old logos because I will say this, as I get older, my reactions definitely lessen. I don't get as mad now as I did in, say, 1989. Just throwing a year out there, just magical year I'm throwing out there. There's no reason for 1989 as a Canuck fan. No reason for 1991 as a Minnesota fan. That Stanley Cup final was heartbreaking. Minnesota could have, might have, didn't. Mario Lemieux wasn't going to be denied. And for Boston, I went through some heartache with them too, and some anger with them. But I didn't get mad at them losing the Stanley Cup final in 88 or 90 because I knew that Edmonton was the better team. But yeah, it can get frustrating at times. I will say that the penalties and calls, I notice I say during the regular season I don't really react. But in the playoffs I can, because that's a best of 7 series, and that penalty kill or power play could decide whether or not the team I'm rooting for actually stays in the playoffs. So there you go. I just wanted to talk about what does or doesn't upset me during a game, and try to keep it as simple as possible. So what upsets you during a game? What doesn't upset you during a game? And again, I wanted to do this too because when I do the reviews, I've often seen the comments about, why aren't you talking about the refereeing in the game? A lot of the time, I think people blaming the refs is an excuse. I think part of it is the idea that, well, my team can't possibly have lost that game fairly. They were the better team. Remember that call they didn't make in the second period? Man, that could have turned things around. And so you get this idea that, well, it isn't really the team that's got problems. It's the it's the officials. The officials have it in for them. But anyways, there you go. Let me know your thoughts in the comment section below, as always. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you have not done so already. Thank you guys so much for watching, for all your support. And yeah, I use the Panic Index magnets because why not? I will talk to you again soon.